Hey, my name is Ryan Moss. I'm 30 years old, and I work the night dispatch shift for a regional freight company called Midland Carrier out of a terminal on the south side of Springfield, Illinois. What a night dispatcher does in its plainest form is this. I manage the movement of freight between the hours of 10 at night and 6 in the morning, when the roads are quieter and most of the country is asleep and the trucks are still running. I route drivers. I handle breakdowns. I coordinate with receiving docks whose hours don't line up with standard business. I manage the problems that arise when things don't go where they were supposed to go, which happens more often at night than during the day, because night has fewer people available to catch the errors before they compound. I work alone in a room the size of a large walk-in closet, with 4 monitors and a radio headset, and a phone that rings on a schedule determined entirely by what is going wrong somewhere on the road between here and wherever the freight is supposed to be. I have been doing this for 6 years. I chose it originally because the pay was good, and the overnight differential made it better. And I have stayed, because I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that I am suited to the specific quality of attention the work requires. Night dispatch is not the same as day dispatch. During the day, problems have witnesses. At night, problems have only me and the driver on the other end of the radio, and the resolution depends entirely on whether I can hold the situation steady long enough to route it toward a solution. I am good at holding situations steady. I am good at staying on the line. My father ran a hardware store for 30 years, which is not an obvious connection to freight dispatch, but which I think explains something about how I was raised. The understanding that the unglamorous work of keeping things running is not less important than the visible work, just less remarked upon. My father opened his store at 7 and closed it at 6 and did the books at the kitchen table after dinner. And the neighborhood had what it needed because he was there, and because he showed up, and because he understood that reliability is itself a form of care. He retired 2 years ago. The store is a phone repair shop now. I think about that sometimes. My schedule is the schedule. I sleep from roughly 7 in the morning until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I am awake during the hours that most people use for the end of their day, the late afternoon, the evening, the first half of the night. I eat dinner at what other people would call midnight. I go to work when the city is going quiet. I come home when it is waking up. This produces a particular kind of life that is not better or worse than a standard schedule, only different in the specific way that living at a 45-degree angle to everyone else is different, adjacent to the normal world, occasionally intersecting with it, largely running parallel. I have a 1-bedroom apartment on Ash Street in Springfield that I have lived in for 4 years and which suits me adequately. I have a small collection of things I have picked up at estate sales over the years, old maps mostly, and a few pieces of mid-century furniture that I bought because they were well made and inexpensive, and which give the apartment a specific quality that my friend Dennis once described as looking like a person actually lives here, which he meant as a compliment. I cook at odd hours. I read in the afternoons before work. I walk in the early mornings after my shift, when the city is at its quietest, and the light is just starting to come in from the east, which is my favorite hour of the day, and which I have to myself in a way that people on standard schedules never do. I am not without a social life, but the social life requires coordination. My friends operate on standard schedules. We see each other on my days off, and occasionally they stay up later than they intended on a Friday to have a drink with me before I go to work, which they do with the particular loyalty of people who understand that the effort is asymmetrical and make it anyway. I have been in 2 relationships since I started this shift. Both of them were good people, and both of them ended, not badly, but conclusively, when it became clear that parallel lives require more active maintenance than either party had managed to sustain. I had been single for 2 years when the phone rang at 2:13 in the morning on a Tuesday in November. I want to be clear about one thing. I was at work when it rang. The call came in on my personal cell, which I keep on the desk beside the dispatch radio, because the dispatcher on the shift before mine sometimes calls with handoff information. I looked at the number. I did not recognize it. It was a 217 area code, which is Central Illinois, which meant it was local. I picked up. Marcus. Her voice was low and unsteady. Not the unsteadiness of someone who has been crying, the unsteadiness of someone who has been trying not to and is at the edge of the effort. I know it's late. I know you said to call if it got bad. It got bad. I understood within 2 seconds that she had the wrong number. The pause I took was 1 second, maybe 2. I could have said wrong number. I could have said it gently, the way you say it when you don't want to make the person feel worse than they already do, and ended the call and gone back to the radio. That was the correct and proper response. I almost did that. My mouth was already forming the words. But there was something in the 2 seconds between hearing her voice and responding that rerouted me, the way a dispatch decision reroutes when new information arrives. I heard what was actually on the line. Not a wrong number. A person at 2 a.m. who had reached for the phone because whatever was happening was bigger than she could hold alone, and who had, in the particular cruelty of a misdial, ended up talking to a stranger instead of the person she needed. And I thought, she still ended up talking to someone. "I'm here," I said. "I'm listening." She went quiet. Then, "You sound different." "I know," I said. "I'm going to tell you something and I need you to hear it before you hang up. You've reached the wrong number. I'm not Marcus. My name is Ryan and I don't know you. But I picked up and I heard what you said and I'm not in a hurry to be anywhere and it's 2 a.m. and if you want to keep talking, I'm here." Silence. Longer than I expected. Then she said, very quietly, "Please don't hang up. I'm so lonely tonight." I didn't hang up. Her name was Lena. Lena Park. She was 29 years old, and she was a freelance copy editor who worked from a home office in a 1-bedroom apartment in Springfield. And she had been having the kind of night that people have when a specific accumulated weight finally reaches the point where it can no longer be managed privately. She had called Marcus because Marcus was her oldest friend, and because he had said, a few weeks earlier when things were clearly not right with her, to call if it got bad. She had transposed 2 digits in his number in the dark of her bedroom at 2 a.m. She had gotten me instead. She told me this over the next few minutes, not all at once, but in the way that information comes when you are talking to someone you don't know and trying to decide how much to say. Careful at first, then less careful. I recognized this sequence because I heard it on the dispatch radio sometimes, the driver who calls in with a minor question and then, in the middle of the conversation, says the actual thing. "The tire's been soft for 50 miles. The load shifted an hour ago. I think I might be getting sick." I let her set the pace. I did not ask questions that pushed. I asked questions that opened. She had been working freelance for 3 years, since leaving an in-house editing position at a publishing company in Chicago, and the leaving had been the right decision professionally, and it also meant leaving Chicago and the life she had in it. The apartment with the good light, the friends who were close enough to walk to, the specific density of a city that made solitude feel like a choice rather than a condition. She had moved to Springfield because the rent made the freelance feasible. She had been in the apartment on Ash Street, not the same one as mine, a different building, same street, for 18 months. I noted the street. I did not say anything about it. The night had been bad because of a specific and ordinary thing. A project she had been counting on had been canceled without warning at 4 in the afternoon. which meant the income she had structured the next 6 weeks around was gone. And she had spent the evening trying to recalibrate, and had done the math twice, and had not found a version of the math that didn't require a hard conversation with her landlord or a credit card, or both. And somewhere around midnight, the math had stopped being the only problem, and had become the thing sitting on top of the larger thing, which was that she had been in Springfield for 18 months, and she did not yet have the kind of friend you called at 2 in the morning. Except for Marcus, who lived in Chicago, and whose number she had apparently memorized wrong. She said this last part with a specific flatness that told me she had recognized the irony herself and had decided it was either funny or terrible and hadn't landed yet. "I'm sorry about the project," I said. "I'll be okay," she said. "That's the annoying part. I know I'll be okay. I just can't feel it at 2 in the morning." 2 in the morning has its own math, I said. "It does," she said. "Everything is worse at 2 in the morning." "Not everything," I said. "The roads are better." She was quiet for a second. "That's a very specific piece of optimism," she said. "I'm a freight dispatcher," I said. "I have a professional relationship with 2 in the morning." The small surprise sound she made was not quite a laugh, but was the immediate relative of one. I recognized the value of it and filed it away. We talked for an hour and 12 minutes. I know the duration because the call log was on my phone when I checked it later. I stayed on the radio with one ear and the call with the other, which is a thing I can do after 6 years of split attention, and nothing on the dispatch end required me to cut the call short. She told me about the copy editing work, the specific pleasure of making a sentence do what it was trying to do. The way a piece of writing that had been tangled in its own logic could be clarified by someone who was close enough to see the problem and far enough not to be attached to the tangle. She told me about the apartment and the light, which was good in the mornings but went flat in the afternoons, and about a second-hand bookshelf she had built herself with moderate success, and which was functional but philosophically unstable, which was the phrase she used. "Philosophically unstable," I said. "It's level," she said. "But it doesn't look like it believes in itself." I thought about that. "That's a specific problem," I said. "It is," she said. "The cure is usually weight," I said. "Books on the bottom shelf. Heavy ones. It gives it something to push against." She was quiet for a second. "How do you know that?" she said. "My father ran a hardware store," I said. "Tell me about that," she said. So I told her about the hardware store on Carpenter Street, and about my father behind the counter knowing where everything was without looking, and about the neighborhood that had what it needed because a decent man showed up every day and understood that reliability was its own kind of care. I told her about the overnight differential, and about the specific quality of attention that working at 2 in the morning required, and about the early morning walks when the light was coming in from the east, and the city was so quiet, it felt like it was being held rather than emptied. She was quiet after that, in the way she was quiet when she was absorbing something. "Do you like it?" she said. "The night shift." "I like being awake when things are quiet," I said. "I like that the problems that come in at this hour are the real ones. Nobody calls dispatch at 2 in the morning about a non-emergency." She made the not quite laugh sound again. "Neither do they call wrong numbers," she said. "No," I said. "They don't." At 3:25 she said she thought she could sleep now. She said it had helped. She said she knew it was a strange thing to say to a stranger, but it had genuinely helped. And she was embarrassed about the call, and grateful for it in the same amount. And she hoped I had not neglected any actual freight emergencies on her behalf. I said, "The freight was fine." She said good night. I said, "Good night." I sat at the dispatch desk for a while after the call ended. The radio was quiet. The monitors showed a normal night. 3 trucks in transit. all on schedule, no flags. Outside the terminal window, the south side of Springfield was doing what it did at 3:30 in the morning, which was nothing in particular, just persisting in the dark. I thought about Lena Park on Ash Street, with the philosophically unstable bookshelf, and the flat afternoon light, and the wrong number she had dialed because she needed to hear a human voice and had transposed 2 digits in the dark. I thought about the hour and 12 minutes and the specific quality of what had been in them. The careful opening up, the math at 2 in the morning, the not quite laugh. I thought about the thing I had not said, which was that I was on Ash Street too, and had been for 4 years, and which I had not said because it seemed like information that would land wrong in the context of a conversation about loneliness and wrong numbers at 2 in the morning. I wrote her number down on the back of a dispatch manifest. I stared at it for a while. I did not do anything with it that night. I did not call her the next day, or the day after. I thought about it and decided that a call from a stranger whose number she had not given him in the daylight was a different thing than the call she had made in the dark, and that the difference mattered. What I did on the Thursday of that week was go to the estate sale on Monroe Street that I had seen posted, and that turned out to be primarily books and furniture from the estate of a woman who had been, by the evidence of what she'd owned, a person of exacting taste. I bought a small writing desk and 2 boxes of books, and I was loading the desk into my truck when I heard a voice say, "That's a good piece." I looked up. She was standing on the sidewalk with a canvas bag over one shoulder and 2 paperbacks in her hand, and the specific look of someone who had just come from the same sale and was evaluating whether she had missed anything worth going back for. Dark hair that had been in a bun that morning and was coming down on one side. A coat with a button missing at the collar. Eyes that were dark and, even in the first moment, very direct. I knew her voice before I placed how I knew it. She did not know mine. "Good bones," I said about the desk. "Solid joinery. The veneer has some lifting at the corners, but that's fixable." "You know furniture," she said. "My father ran a hardware store," I said. She looked at me. I watched the recognition travel through her expression. It was not instant. It moved slowly, like a calculation resolving, and then it arrived and she went very still. "Ryan," she said. "Yes," I said. She looked at the truck. She looked at the desk. She looked at me. "You're on Ash Street," she said. "I heard you say it and I didn't realize." "Different building," I said. "Same street." She stood on the sidewalk with her books and her canvas bag and the wind taking the loose pieces of her hair, and she looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. Not frightened. Not performing. Something more complicated than either. The expression of someone who is revising a story she has been carrying and trying to find the new shape of it. "I didn't know you were going to be here," I said. "I come to estate sales on Monroe most Thursdays. I was going to figure out how to reach you. I hadn't figured it out yet." "How long have you been trying to figure it out?" she said. "Since Tuesday night," I said. "3 days," she said. "I was being careful," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "Why?" she said. "Because what happened on Tuesday night was private," I said. "And I didn't want to be the person who turned a wrong number into something that felt like an intrusion in the daylight." She was quiet. "That was considerate," she said. The tone was careful, evaluating, the way she'd gotten on the call when she was deciding how much to say. "I thought so," I said. "And also, you were afraid," she said. I looked at her. "I was also afraid," I said. The not quite laugh. I knew the sound of it now. It was Fuller in person. We had coffee at the place on 6th Street, an hour that became 2. She told me the math had sorted itself, not perfectly, but adequately. The way things sorted at 2 in the morning when you saw them at 10 in the morning, and they were the same problems, but in the right light. She told me she had called Marcus the next morning and told him about the wrong number, and Marcus had said that the fact that a stranger had stayed on the line for over an hour said something about the stranger. She told me Marcus had said to keep the number. "Did you?" I said. "I memorized it," she said. "So I couldn't misdial it." We had coffee at the place on 6th Street, an hour that became 2. She told me the math had sorted itself. Not perfectly, but adequately, the way things sort at 10 in the morning that were impossible at 2. She had called Marcus the next morning and told him the story of the wrong number, and Marcus had said that a stranger staying on the line for over an hour said something about the stranger, and she had said she knew. And he had said to keep the number. "Did you?" I said. "I memorized it," she said. "So I couldn't misdial it." She said this with the specific dryness that I recognized from the call, the humor that lived in the accuracy of the observation rather than in its delivery. I had heard it once at 2 in the morning and recognized it now in daylight as the same thing, unchanged by context. She was a copy editor, which I had known from the call but which became more specific as she described it. What she actually did was read manuscripts, novels, mostly, and narrative nonfiction, and make them structurally sound. Not stylistically, though style was part of it. Structurally, she looked at the architecture of a piece of writing and found where it was doing something other than what it intended, where the logic had broken down in a way the writer was too close to see, where the argument or the story had a load-bearing section that was not, on inspection, bearing the load it was supposed to bear. "You read structures," I said. "In text," she said, "the same way you'd read a building. Or a freight manifest," I said. She looked at me. I hadn't thought of it that way. "A manifest is a narrative," I said. "Here is what is supposed to happen. In what order, arriving where it is supposed to arrive. Night Dispatch is mostly editing, finding where the narrative has gone wrong and rerouting it." She was quiet for a moment, in the way she was quiet when she was absorbing something and deciding what it meant. "That's a better description of my job than I've been using," she said. "Use it," I said. She looked at me with the direct eyes. "You're unexpectedly good at this," she said. "At what?" I said. "At saying things that clarify instead of things that fill space," she said. "Most people fill space. You wait until you have something to say. I work alone most of the time," I said. "You get selective." "Or you were always selective," she said, "and the job suited you." I thought about that. She was probably right. She had the quality of a person who was usually right about the things she was looking at, which I had gathered from the call and which the coffee was confirming. She had brought one of the books from the estate sale, a novel she had not read and was evaluating for purchase, and at some point she set it on the table and I picked it up and looked at the first page, which was the only page I needed, and said, "The opening is doing too much work." She looked at me. "There are 3 things happening in the first paragraph," I said, "and none of them are the story. They are all set up for the story. The actual narrative starts 3 paragraphs later." The writer didn't trust the reader. She took the book back. She read the first paragraph. "You're right," she said. She set it down. "You read." "I read," I said. "What do you read?" "History, mostly," I said. "Logistics history. The movement of things. I read about the Transcontinental Railroad for 3 months last year." "Tell me something from it," she said. So I told her about the Central Pacific's progress across the Sierra Nevada in the winter of 1866 and 1867, about the tunnels drilled by hand through solid granite, about the Chinese workers who lowered themselves in reed baskets down the cliff faces to set the black powder charges, about the specific problem of moving a mountain out of the way, one basket of rubble at a time, with the winter coming and the competing railroad gaining ground from the east. About the foreman's notes that describe the work in plain sentences. Today we moved 40 feet. Tomorrow we will try to move 40 feet more. She listened with the full attention quality. When I finished, she said, 40 feet a day. On a good day, I said. That's the same as editing, she said. Some days you move 40 feet, and some days you move 30, and the mountain is still in front of you, and you trust that the accumulation is the thing. I looked at her. Yes, I said. Exactly that. We walked back to Ash Street in the November cold, the 4 blocks between the cafe and her building, and the city had the specific quality it had in November afternoons, a flatness of light that was not gloomy exactly, but was honest about the season, the way November is always honest. I walked her back to her building on Ash Street. At the door she turned and looked at me with the direct eyes that had, I now understood, been direct even over the phone, the quality carried in her voice the way certain people carry their whole self in whatever medium they are using. I need to tell you something, she said. Okay, I said. I was embarrassed about that call for the first 2 days, she said. Not about calling you, about what I said, about saying I was lonely to a stranger. You weren't saying it to a stranger, I said. You were saying it to Marcus. I said it to you, she said. Yes, I said. And you stayed, she said. Yes, I said. She looked at me on her front step in the November afternoon. I know it's fast, she said. I know we have only technically met twice, once without knowing it and once now. But there are things you understand about me that took me months to let people know in Chicago, and I am standing here thinking that I don't know how to be careful about that. I don't have the mechanism for it. Then don't be careful, I said. I stayed on the line for an hour and 12 minutes on a Tuesday night at 2 in the morning because I didn't want to route the call anywhere else. I didn't want it to end. I have been thinking about you since the moment I put the phone down, and I have been careful about how I acted on that. But I was not careful about the feeling. The feeling was immediate. She looked at me, the revision in progress expression, working out the new shape. You timed the call, she said. I checked the log at work, I said. 1 hour and 12 minutes. That's a long time, she said. It wasn't long enough, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in her expression, not the calculating quality she wore when she was assessing something, but something older and more unguarded. I need to tell you the other thing, she said. Okay, I said. I moved to Springfield because the rent made the freelance viable, she said. That is the practical reason. The other reason is that Chicago had gotten loud in a specific way. There was someone there for about a year who was a very good reason to stay, and then turned out not to be. And when it ended, I needed somewhere that didn't have him on every corner. She looked at the November Street. Springfield doesn't have him anywhere. That's been good. But Springfield also doesn't have anyone I've known long enough to call in the middle of the night, and that's been less good. She looked at me. I'm telling you this because you have been honest with me, she said, and because you are on Ash Street and you work the same hours I keep, and because something about this entire week feels like the universe deciding to do something useful for once. And I do not want to perform being less affected by this than I am. I'm not good at that. I know, I said. From one phone call? She said. From one phone call, I said. She put her hand briefly over mine on the stair rail. She did not move it quickly. She just put it there and left it a moment, and then she straightened and looked at me with the honest eyes. You are going to tell me now, she said, whether you think I am moving too fast. I don't think in those terms, I said. I think in terms of whether something is at the right load, whether the structure has the capacity for what's being asked of it. And? She said. And the structure is sound, I said. That's my read. You can have a second opinion. I don't want a second opinion, she said. I did not sleep well that afternoon. Not badly, just incompletely. The way sleep goes when something that has been at low pressure has moved up. I lay in the apartment on Ash Street and looked at the ceiling and thought about Lena Park and the philosophically unstable bookshelf and the call at 2 a.m. and the fact that she had moved to Springfield after something had ended in Chicago. And I thought about parallel lives and how they sometimes cross, and how the crossing is almost never where you expect it. I thought, she has been having this year, and I have been having mine, and both of us were on this street, and we were running parallel, until a wrong number made them intersect. I thought about what I had said, that the structure was sound. I believed it. I had been in the work long enough to know what a sound structure felt like, and what a failing one felt like. And I had been running at low pressure long enough that I knew the difference between protecting a structure and simply not loading it. Lena Park was not a thing I needed to be careful around. She was a thing I wanted to stop being careful about. I went to work that night and sat in the dispatch room, and the radio was quiet for most of the first 2 hours, and I thought about 40 feet a day and about the accumulation being the thing. She reached up and put her hand on my face the way you touch something you have been trying to picture from a voice and are now confirming is real. She kissed me on the front step of her building on Ash Street in the November cold. And it was quiet, and it was certain, and it tasted like the specific relief of a thing arriving that you have been holding space for without knowing you were holding it. She pulled back and looked at me. You stayed on the line, she said. You asked me to, I said. I know, she said. But you could have said wrong number. I know, I said. 7 months after a wrong number rang at 2 a.m, Lena Park's bookshelf believed in itself. I had come over in December with a piece of furniture dolly rubber and 2 sandbag-style doorstops I had weighted with playground sand from the hardware store, a solution my father had shown me for unstable freestanding shelves, involving ballast at the base and the principle that anything that cannot find its own center of gravity needs to borrow some from the earth. We had reorganized the bottom 2 shelves while she made coffee, and when we stepped back the shelf had the settled look of something that had stopped doubting. She looked at it for a moment. It believes in itself, she said. It has something to push against now, I said. Your father taught you that, she said. He taught me a lot of things I don't fully understand until I need them, I said. She made a small sound and went to get the coffee. She is, in the specific way that matters to me, the person I had been running parallel to the world in hope of finding. She works at hours that overlap mine, late evenings and early mornings, the freelance schedule that has no fixed walls, which means we are both awake at 2 a.m. and neither of us has to apologize for it. She comes to the terminals sometimes on slow nights and sits in the dispatch room with her laptop and works while I work. And the quality of that room with 2 people in it, rather than 1, is different in a way I have not found language for except to say that the monitors seem less cold. She has met Marcus, who drove down from Chicago in March, and who looked at me for approximately 45 seconds when we were introduced, and then said, "Good," as if he had been waiting to confirm something. He did not elaborate. He went back to his dinner. My father came in April. He met Lena over the phone first, which was the right order for us, and in person at a Sunday dinner that I made at the apartment at 2 p.m, the hour I have to myself, which now I share. He talked to her about the hardware store, and about the neighborhood, and about the specific pleasure of being relied upon for something practical, and she listened to him the way she listened to everything. with the quality of attention she gave a manuscript she was editing, looking for what it was trying to do, and helping it do it better. When he left, he shook my hand, and then he looked at the apartment in the way my father looks at rooms, the way he looked at the hardware store, assessing what the room was doing, whether everything was where it needed to be. He said, "She keeps good hours." He meant it as the highest possible compliment. The man spent 30 years opening at 7 and closing at 6. He understood that showing up at the right time, consistently, without being asked, was its own form of devotion. A woman named Denise lives in the apartment below mine and has lived there for 11 years and knows everything that happens on Ash Street in the way only very long-term tenants do. She introduced herself to Lena in February when Lena was coming in from a morning walk and Denise was coming out with her dog, and I know this because Lena told me about it that evening. Denise had said, "You're the one upstairs." Lena had said she was the one on the same street, different building. Denise had said, "Same thing now." And then she had walked on with her dog. I have been doing this work for 6 years. I have held the line on a lot of calls. I have routed a lot of things to where they needed to go, in the hours when most of the world was asleep, and the freight was still moving, and the problems that came in were the real ones, with no buffer of daylight between what was wrong and what needed to happen next. I know something about what it means to stay on a call, when the easy thing is to end it. I know something about the specific courage required to say, at 2 a.m, into a phone line you are not sure of, the thing that is actually true. I know that the person on the other end of a wrong number is not the person you called. I know that sometimes they are the person you needed. She called a wrong number once. She said she was lonely. She asked me not to hang up. I stay on the line. That is the whole of what I know how to do. I stayed.